My name is Samantha Cole, and I'm 34 years old. For most of my adult life, I've been known as the family disappointment. While my sister Victoria collected degrees from the University of Chicago and job offers from corporate law firms that paid six figures before bonuses, I spent my days teaching art to second graders on the South Side, a job that, according to my mother, barely counts as a career. To my students, I was Ms. Cole, the paint lady. To my family, I was the reminder of everything they'd decided not to be. The Cole family was old money, not the kind that builds empires, but the kind that remembers them. Chicago real estate, a few patents from my grandfather's manufacturing days, and a portfolio that had been feeding country club memberships for 3 generations. We weren't billionaires, but we were comfortable. At least they were. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Pilsen that smelled faintly of oil paint and rainwater. The radiator hissed like a cat in winter, and the windows rattled every time the L train passed. But it was mine. The first space I'd ever paid for without my parents' help. I used to think independence would make them proud. It didn't. It just made me invisible. Last month, Victoria graduated from Northwestern Law. The Cole name had been echoing through the university halls long before her, thanks to donations my father strategically contributed during her undergrad years. She was brilliant, no doubt. Driven, meticulous, photogenic, and perfectly aware of it. The kind of daughter who made for glossy magazine features about young women reshaping the future of corporate America. The kind of daughter who fit the family narrative. The invitation to her graduation party arrived in a cream envelope with raised gold lettering, celebrating Victoria Cole, our pride, our future. At the bottom, written in my mother's looping handwriting, Samantha, please dress appropriately. Translation: Don't embarrass us. The party was at the Drake Hotel downtown, a ballroom filled with people who'd never ridden the subway and thought Whole Foods was roughing it. 200 guests, a jazz trio, champagne that cost more than my monthly rent, and a dessert table shaped like a scale of justice. I stood by the wall holding a glass of club soda, watching as my parents floated from group to group like campaigners for the Victoria Party. Victoria just got an offer from Dunning and Keene, my father boomed, proud and loud enough for half the room to hear. 205,000 starting plus signing bonus. He'd been waiting years to say that. Then, for contrast, came the usual footnote. Our older daughter, Samantha, teaches art at an elementary school. Such rewarding work. He always added a pause before rewarding, like he wasn't sure if it was the right word or an inside joke. The truth was, I loved my job. My classroom was chaos, the good kind. Paint-splattered smocks, giggles, the occasional meltdown over broken crayons. But every day, I watched children find a language they didn't know they had. One of my students, Ethan, had stopped speaking after his mother died. After months of drawing silent blue storms, one morning he handed me a painting, a yellow house with a window full of light, and whispered, "She's home." I'd cried in the supply closet after school that day, but my parents never asked about moments like that. They asked about my salary, my benefits, whether I'd ever considered doing something with my degree. To them, the value of a thing was what it could buy. I hadn't planned to go to the graduation party. Then an envelope arrived by certified mail 2 days before. No return address, just my name in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a single note. Your grandfather left something you were meant to have. Don't leave the party early. H.L. Henry Lawton. The name tugged at a half-forgotten memory. My grandfather's attorney. The man who used to visit our house in a gray wool coat and always brought me peppermint candies when I was little. I hadn't seen him since Granddad's funeral 10 years ago. I arrived at the Drake on time, in my best, only black dress, the one I wore to parent-teacher conferences and weddings where I had to pretend to belong. Victoria was already in the spotlight, laughing at the podium, her crimson lips curving perfectly as she accepted yet another toast. Victoria represents the next generation of excellence, my father said, voice booming through the microphone. She carries the Cole legacy forward. The room clapped, Someone actually whistled. I stood near the catering table, pretending to be fascinated by a tray of shrimp. Then my mother's voice, sharp as the click of her heels, cut through the music. Oh, there's Samantha. She teaches at a school. Oh, what was it, dear? The one near Pilsen. Pilsen Elementary, I said quietly. Her smile froze. Yes, that one. She does art therapy, I think. I wanted to correct her. It wasn't therapy, it was education. But what was the point? She'd already turned back to the mayor's wife before I'd finished inhaling. I found a seat in the back corner near a waiter refilling champagne. That's when I saw him, an older man in a dark gray suit standing near the exit. He wasn't mingling, wasn't drinking, just watching. His posture was steady, his gaze even, like he'd been waiting for a specific cue. When the band took a break, he walked toward me. Ms. Cole, he asked, voice low but firm. I nodded. I'm Henry Lawton, your grandfather's attorney. My pulse jumped. From, yes, William Cole's estate. I believe we last met when you were, 15? 14, I said automatically. You brought him peppermint bark. He smiled faintly. He insisted it was the only proper Christmas candy. He glanced around the ballroom. Would you mind stepping aside for a moment? I have a letter that belongs to you. We walked toward a quieter hallway lined with mirrors and white roses. From his coat pocket, Mr. Lawton took out a sealed envelope. Thick, ivory paper. My name written in my grandfather's unmistakable handwriting. My throat tightened. He wrote this before he died, Lawton said gently. He asked me to deliver it when you reached an age he called clarity. He thought you'd know what that meant. I opened it carefully. Inside, in my grandfather's looping script, Sam, I've watched you build what others don't see. Patience, kindness, purpose. Those things compound better than money. You'll soon discover what I left unfinished. Trust yourself when the time comes. Grandpa. No explanations. No instructions. Just faith. And for a man like William Cole, faith wasn't cheap. I looked up. What did he mean by unfinished? Mr. Lawton's eyes were calm, but there was something behind them. An unspoken, you'll find out soon enough. Tonight may clarify things, he said. And Samantha, if anyone asks you to sign something, don't. He left before I could ask anything else. When I returned to the ballroom, the lights had dimmed. My father was at the microphone again, champagne in hand. Before we wrap up tonight, he said, Elaine and I have a small surprise for our youngest achiever. A waiter rolled out a white cloth-draped stand. On it, a silver key fob glinted under the chandeliers. The keys, my father said proudly, to a brand new Tesla Model S, and a little something else. My mother stepped forward, holding a large envelope. Victoria, she said, smiling like a woman unveiling a masterpiece. This is the deed to your new apartment in Lincoln Park. The crowd gasped. Applause, flashes from iPhones. Victoria covered her mouth in mock shock, then hugged them both, laughing. You guys are insane! Insane, yes. $1.2 million for a Lincoln Park apartment wasn't small. The applause swelled again. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I wanted to walk out, just leave. No note, no goodbye. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Don't go, 5 minutes. I stayed. Victoria was still basking in the glow when my mother tapped the mic. And now, one last matter. She scanned the room. Samantha, dear, come up here for a moment. Every head turned. My stomach dropped. What? Just come, my father called. We need a quick signature for the family documents. Lawton's words flashed through my head. Don't sign anything. Still, I walked up, legs wooden. At the podium, my mother smiled too brightly. It's a small administrative thing, she said under her breath. Just acknowledgement that the business side of the estate stays streamlined. You know you're not really interested in all that, right? She held out a pen. The paper had fine print, multiple pages. At the top, Waiver of Beneficiary Rights, Estate of William Cole. The air left my lungs. This is Grandpa's estate? Yes, my father said briskly. We're consolidating, makes tax filings cleaner. You're not losing anything, it just... Mr. Lawton's voice cut through the crowd. I wouldn't recommend that, Ms. Cole. He was at the foot of the stage now, calm as ever. The chatter stilled instantly. My father stiffened. Henry, what are you doing? Exactly what your father asked me to, Lawton said, climbing the short steps. To ensure that fairness, not pressure, governs this inheritance. What inheritance? Victoria asked, half laughing. Dad's handling everything. Was handling, Lawton corrected. He opened his briefcase and set a thick file on the podium. Until the court reissued letters testamentary last month, there's been a development in William Cole's estate. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's color drained. This is a private event, my father snapped. Then perhaps you shouldn't have turned it into a legal proceeding, Lawton said evenly, glancing at the paper in my mother's hand. A waiver signed in public, under duress, before witnesses. That's hardly private. Gasps rippled through the room. Mr. Lawton, my father began, forcing a laugh. I think you're confused. The estate was settled a decade ago. Lawton opened the file. It was administered, yes. Not settled. The late Mr. Cole filed an amended codicil 3 months before his passing, which was recently verified by the court. My mother tried to step closer. Henry, let's discuss this Monday. He shook his head. Your father specified public disclosure. He wanted transparency when the time came? He turned to me. Ms. Cole, the codicil names you as provisional trustee of a charitable trust established from your grandfather's remaining assets, approximately $9 million in property and investments. You and your sister are both beneficiaries, but only one of you may serve as lead trustee, contingent upon demonstrated public service. Silence. Even the band stopped pretending to tune instruments. Victoria blinked. What? Your grandfather believed wealth should circulate with purpose, Lawton said. He designed a structure to ensure it. My father's voice cracked for the first time. That's impossible. He gave me full control. Not full, Lawton replied. Temporary, revocable, which it now is. Victoria turned to me, incredulous. Are you telling me she gets to decide what happens to the money? Not immediately, Lawton said. The court will review. But given her documented record? What record? My mother demanded. He opened another folder. Letters from the Chicago Board of Education, grants from the Art for All initiative, testimonials from parents whose children participated in Ms. Cole's art literacy program. Your father kept copies of everything. Perhaps you didn't know. Well, see, he placed a few pages on the podium. Photos, handwritten letters in crayon, newspaper clippings with titles like Local Teacher Brings Color to Gray Classrooms. The air shifted. Even Victoria's expression faltered. This isn't about punishing anyone, Lawton said. But the trust follows criteria your father called the Cole measure. It values measurable impact on others' lives, not degrees or salaries. I stared at the papers, barely breathing. He watched you, Lawton continued. Quietly, for years. You didn't need to impress him. You already did. The ballroom was a snow globe, everyone frozen, waiting to see what would fall. Finally, my father spoke, voice low, dangerous. This is absurd. We'll challenge it. You can try, Lawton said. But your father anticipated that. The original recordings of the signing are lodged with the probate court. 3 witnesses, notarized. Victoria crossed her arms. Even if it's real, it doesn't change anything. I've worked for everything I have. Law school clerkships? No one disputes that, Lawton said. But the estate isn't a reward for ambition, it's an investment in conscience. The phrase hung there. Investment in conscience. Something my family had long since stopped believing in. I didn't say a word. Not when my mother started whispering to a man who looked suspiciously like a family lawyer. Not when my father demanded everyone enjoy dessert, as if the night could still be salvaged. Not even when Victoria cornered me near the coat check, eyes bright with fury. "You're not seriously thinking of keeping that money, are you?" she hissed. "I haven't thought of anything yet." "Because you don't get it, Sam. You'd burn it all on crayons and field trips. You're not smart enough? Disciplined enough?" Her silence was answer enough. "I'm not the one who asked a room full of people to applaud a Tesla," I said quietly. For once, she didn't have a comeback. Outside, the night air smelled like rain and exhaust. The hotel lights glowed gold behind me, reflections trembling in puddles on Michigan Avenue. I walked for 2 blocks before I realized I was shaking. From anger, from disbelief, maybe both. $9 million, a trust, my name, my grandfather, the quiet engineer who'd built an empire of precision tools and patents, had chosen me to carry forward something other than prestige. And my family, who'd spent their lives measuring worth in digits, had no idea how to fight something they couldn't price. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. My mother: "We need to talk immediately." My father: "Do not speak to that attorney again." Victoria: "Congratulations on ruining my night." I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I called the number on Mr. Lawton's card. He picked up on the second ring. "Ms. Cole, I wondered when you'd call." "Henry," I said, trying to sound calm. "I don't understand any of this." "You don't need to." "Not yet," he said. "But you will. The codicil activates automatically. There'll be a preliminary court conference in 2 weeks. Until then, don't sign or release anything. I'll send you the full document today." "And my parents?" "We'll try to regain control. Expect that. But remember, your grandfather anticipated it." I leaned against my window watching a city bus lumber past. "Why me?" "Because you used your life to build others, not to display yourself," he said simply. "And because he trusted you to know the difference between using wealth and being used by it." When I hung up, I looked around my apartment. Paint-smeared coffee table, half-finished student projects drying on racks, the framed photo of Grandpa and me at Navy Pier when I was 8. He was holding a melted ice cream cone. I was holding his hand. For the first time, I realized he'd meant it literally, that some things are worth holding on to even when they melt. That week, the story broke in the Chicago Tribune. Ayersville Sparks family rift. Educator named trustee of Cole Estate. They used a photo from the party. Victoria radiant in her red gown, my parents beaming. Me blurry in the background like an afterthought. The caption read, "Samantha Cole, 34, appointed trustee of late William Cole's charitable trust." I turned off my phone for 2 days. At school, parents whispered. My students didn't care. They just asked if we could paint rainbows again, so we did. Every brushstroke felt like breathing. 2 days before the hearing, I got another letter. This one official, envelope stamped with the seal of the Cook County Probate Court. Hearing date, Tuesday, 9 a.m. Parties, the estate of William Cole. I stared at it for a long time. I knew what it meant. It meant this wasn't over. It meant the real fight was about to begin. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of being the disappointment. Because maybe disappointment was just another word for different. The morning of the court hearing, Chicago looked washed clean. It had rained all night. A cold, steady drizzle that left the streets shining and the air smelling of metal and wet stone. I left my apartment early, portfolio under my arm, because Henry Lawton had told me to bring proof of purpose. Whatever that meant. The courthouse on Dearborn was gray and heavy, the kind of building that reminded you how small you were. I found the probate division on the 4th floor, where the hallway buzzed with lawyers in dark suits and people clutching folders like lifelines. Outside courtroom 412, I saw them, my parents and Victoria. They looked like they'd stepped out of a family portrait. Polished, composed, color coordinated. My mother's pearl earrings, my father's navy suit, Victoria's hair pulled into a perfect chignon. I caught my reflection in the glass door. Wind blown, no makeup, dark circles. For once, I didn't care. "Sam," my father said, voice clipped. "Before we go in, we need to talk." "I'm listening." "You don't understand how this works," he said, lowering his voice. "Your grandfather's codicil was sentimental. It won't hold up. We'll petition for full control and set up a scholarship in your name. Everyone wins." I met his eyes. "Everyone except me." "You'll be protected?" he said. Like that was the point. That's not what I want. My mother exhaled sharply. "This isn't about want, Samantha. It's about stability. You're not equipped to manage millions in assets." "I manage 30 kids with paintbrushes and attention spans of 3 minutes," I said quietly. "Trust me, I can handle balance sheets." Victoria gave a small laugh. "You think you can run a trust?" "Sam, this isn't a school fundraiser. It's real money." "And real lives," I said. "You'd know that if you ever worked with anyone who couldn't afford your retainer." Her smile vanished. Inside, the courtroom smelled faintly of coffee and carpet cleaner. Judge Ellen Warner sat at the bench, sharp-eyed and calm, a woman who'd clearly seen too many families tear each other apart over dead men's money. "Case 23P4098, the clerk called. Estate of William Cole." Henry Lawton stood beside me at the petitioner's table. Across from us sat my family's attorney, a man named Miles Crane, all expensive cufflinks and thin patience. "Your Honor," Crane began, "the Cole family contests the validity of the codicil filed by Mr. Lawton. We believe the late Mr. Cole was not of sound mind when it was executed." Judge Warner looked at him over her glasses. "Do you have medical evidence?" "We're in the process of, so no," she said. "Continue." Crane cleared his throat. "Even if valid, the codicil's language is ambiguous. It introduces unmanageable criteria, so-called service requirements, that have no measurable legal standard." Lawton waited until the judge nodded to him, then said simply, "Your Honor, the codicil was witnessed, notarized, and video recorded. The service clause defines its own metrics, verified hours, institutional references, and third-party reports. Mr. Cole was an engineer. He believed in data." He handed up a thin folder. The judge flipped through it. All properly notarized. All filed. Very methodical. Then she turned to me. "Ms. Cole, you're the named provisional trustee. Are you prepared to assume that responsibility?" "I am," I said, even though my heart was hammering. Crane leaned forward. "Your Honor, my clients aren't trying to deprive Ms. Cole. They simply believe she's unsuited for this role." My father added, "Samantha's a wonderful teacher, but she doesn't have the financial experience to oversee a multi-million-dollar trust." Judge Warner raised an eyebrow. "And your solution?" "To appoint an independent trustee," Crane said. "Someone with fiduciary experience." Lawton's tone stayed calm. "Mr. Cole's will explicitly bars third-party management unless both granddaughters consent, and one of them doesn't." The judge looked at me. "That true?" "Yes, Your Honor, I don't consent." "Well," she said, "that settles that." Crane sighed. "We'd also like to raise concerns about undue influence. Ms. Cole met with Mr. Lawton shortly before the party." Lawton interrupted. "Per my professional obligation, Your Honor. And 10 years after the document was executed." Judge Warner nodded. "Noted. Anything else?" Crane hesitated, then sat down. It was Victoria's turn to speak. The judge allowed her a statement as a beneficiary. "Your Honor," she began smoothly, "I don't question my grandfather's love for my sister. But this setup, rewarding subjective good deeds, isn't what he intended. He valued discipline, achievement, contribution to the family legacy. That's what I've worked for." Judge Warner studied her. You're an attorney, Ms. Cole? Yes, I just passed the bar. Then you should know the court's job is to enforce the testator's intent, not yours. A few people behind us chuckled quietly. Victoria flushed. I'm not trying to take anything. I just think the money should be used responsibly. Responsibly, I repeated softly. Like buying a Tesla. Her jaw tightened. Judge Warner tapped her pen. I appreciate the passion on both sides, but the codicil seems clear. The trust funds are to be used for community programs in arts and education, with trusteeship determined by demonstrated public service. She glanced at me again. Ms. Cole, do you have evidence of such service? Yes, Your Honor. Lawton handed over a binder. Letters from parents, school board commendations, Department of Education grants, and a fiscal report from the nonprofit Ms. Cole founded 2 years ago. The judge leafed through the documents, her expression softening slightly. You've done impressive work, Ms. Cole. Thank you. Unpaid? All of it. Why? I hesitated, then said, because sometimes art is the only language people have left. Something flickered in her eyes. I see. After a long pause, Judge Warner delivered her decision. The court recognizes the codicil as valid and enforceable. Mr. Cole's instructions are unambiguous. Ms. Samantha Cole is hereby appointed acting trustee of the William Cole Charitable Trust, pending annual review. My mother made a strangled sound. My father's hand shot out to steady her. The court also notes, the judge continued, that the second beneficiary, Ms. Victoria Cole, retains a contingent interest subject to fulfillment of the service clause, 1/500 verified volunteer hours over a 24-month period. Upon completion, she may assume co-trusteeship. Crane stood. Your Honor, she held up a hand. You can appeal, but I'd advise against it. Mr. Cole drafted this codicil like a man who knew his family very well. The gavel came down. Case closed. Outside the courtroom, reporters hovered like vultures. I kept my head down and pushed through the crowd. Victoria caught up to me on the sidewalk. Are you happy now? She demanded. No, I said. Just tired. You humiliated us. In court. I didn't write the codicil. But you exploited it. I honored it. She folded her arms, shaking her head. You think you're better than us. No, I said. I think you stopped seeing what better even means. Her voice dropped. You're going to regret this. I already did, I said, walking away. For most of my life. The next few weeks were chaos. Emails from journalists, letters from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Some congratulated me. Some accused me of betrayal. The trust required a formal board, so Henry and I spent hours at his office, sorting through bylaws, paperwork, and old investment accounts that hadn't been touched in a decade. Half the assets were tied up in real estate. Old industrial buildings my grandfather had bought in the 1980s. They were crumbling, but the locations were perfect for community centers. Henry smiled when I said it aloud. He said you'd think that, he told me. He called those properties unfinished canvases. We filed the paperwork to convert the first warehouse on Halstead into an art education hub. Part gallery, part classroom, part therapy space for kids and adults alike. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. My parents didn't call for weeks. Then one Sunday afternoon, my mother showed up at my apartment. No driver, no pearls, just a beige trench coat and a box of pastries from a bakery she used to take us to when we were little. She stood awkwardly in the doorway. I didn't know if you still like these. I do, I said. Come in. She looked around my tiny living room. Mismatched furniture, half-finished paintings leaning against the wall, a mug that said, teach, inspire, repeat. You have your grandfather's eyes, she said quietly. He always saw what the rest of us missed. For a moment, she looked like herself again. Not the woman who chased status, but The one who once painted with me on the kitchen floor when I was 5. I thought we were helping you, she said. By pushing you, by protecting you from smallness. I smiled sadly. You mistook humility for failure. Tears welled in her eyes. Your father's having trouble adjusting. Because he lost control? Because he lost his mirror, she said softly. The version of himself he built from his father's approval. Now he doesn't know who to be. She set the pastry box on the table. He wants to talk. Maybe not today, but soon. I nodded. When he's ready. She hesitated at the door. You were always the stronger one, you know. We just couldn't see it. A month later, the first Cole Foundation meeting convened in a borrowed conference room at City Hall. Around the table sat Henry, a representative from the Chicago Board of Education, 2 nonprofit directors, and me. Agenda: site renovation, grant applications, volunteer recruitment. Halfway through, someone asked if I had a mission statement. I thought of my students, of my grandfather's note. Then I said, to turn inherited privilege into shared possibility. Henry nodded, satisfied. That's very William of you. Victoria, meanwhile, had disappeared from social media. Her LinkedIn quietly changed from Associate Dunning and Keene to on sabbatical. Then, out of nowhere, she called me. Can we meet? She asked. Her voice was smaller, stripped of its usual edge. We met at a diner near Wicker Park. She looked human. Jeans, messy bun, no makeup. I got rejected from the bar's character and fitness review, she said flatly. They want more evidence of community involvement. I guess Grandpa's clause wasn't so crazy after all. I didn't say, I told you so. I just listened. They said I could reapply in 2 years if I show consistent service, she continued. So, I found something. She slid a flyer across the table. Free legal aid clinic. Saturdays, 10-4. They help tenants fight eviction, she said. They could use someone who knows contracts. That's a good start, I said. It's not glamorous. Neither is teaching, I said. But it matters. For the first time, she smiled without posing. Do you really think Grandpa believed in all this? Or did he just want to punish Dad? He believed people could learn, I said. Even at 50. Even at 29. She looked out the window. Then maybe it's not too late for me. By autumn, the warehouse on Halstead was buzzing with life. We called it the workshop. Kids from 3 different schools came for weekend classes. Painting, sculpting, even digital art. Local volunteers helped renovate, repaint, and build easels from the old wood beams we'd salvaged. One Saturday, as I supervised a group of 7-year-olds finger painting a mural, I heard a familiar voice behind me. Need an extra hand? I turned. My father stood in the doorway, wearing jeans for the first time in my memory. He looked older, softer. I brought the tool set, he said. Figured I could help fix that sink you mentioned. I blinked. You know how to fix sinks? He smiled. I used to, before I learned how to hire people to do it for me. He spent the whole afternoon tightening pipes and talking quietly to the kids. Before he left, he pulled me aside. I thought I built a legacy with buildings, he said. Turns out, you're the one who gave them purpose. For once, I didn't deflect. I just hugged him. And he didn't pull away. 6 months later, the foundation had 3 active centers. The Tribune ran another piece, this time with a headline that made me laugh. From family feud to community renewal, the Coles redefine legacy. The article showed Victoria at a clinic table surrounded by clients, smiling, genuinely. She'd logged 700 hours of pro bono work already. The reporter quoted her saying, "My grandfather gave us wealth. My sister taught me what to do with it." I read it twice. On a quiet evening that winter, Henry visited my classroom after the kids left. He looked around at the drying canvases, the glittering mess of colors, the smell of acrylic and hope. He'd be proud, he said. I smiled. He already was. Henry handed me a small envelope. Final correspondence from the estate. I think it's yours. Inside was a letter in my grandfather's handwriting. Sam, if you're reading this, you've proven that legacy isn't about blood or money. It's about where you plant what you've been given. Don't let the trust become a monument. Keep it moving. WC. There was a postscript. Tell your sister that real lawyers defend more than contracts. I laughed through tears. The next spring, Victoria and I stood together at the opening of the workshop's new sensory art room. The mayor came, so did our parents. When the ribbon was cut, the crowd clapped, not for us, but for the kids who'd painted the mural behind us. After the speeches, Victoria turned to me. So, co-trustees? I looked at her, genuinely proud. You earned it. She nodded, eyes shining. You know, I used to think revenge meant making people regret underestimating you. And now? Now I think it means building something so good they have to admit they were wrong. I smiled. Welcome to the club. Later that night, after everyone left, I walked alone through the empty building. The murals glowed softly under the lights. Hands, hearts, colors blending. I touched one of the painted handprints and thought about everything that had happened. The humiliation, the courtroom, the disbelief, the shift. Revenge, I realized, wasn't always loud. Sometimes it looked like forgiveness wearing work boots. Sometimes it sounded like laughter echoing off brick walls once filled with silence. And sometimes it was just living well enough that the people who doubted you can't ignore it anymore. I locked up the studio and stepped into the cool night air. Chicago's skyline shimmered in the distance in glass steel light. My grandfather's city, my city now. And for the first time, I felt like I belonged to it. Not as the disappointment, but as the proof that sometimes the quietest person in the room ends up rewriting the story.